Many men think insulin only matters for blood sugar, but in reality, it sits at the center of almost every metabolic change we've discussed so far. By this point in the series, you've seen how energy access declines, fat storage increases, stress and sleep alter regulation, and blood tests can remain normal for years. Insulin connects all of these patterns. Insulin is not just a blood sugar hormone. It is a master signaling hormone that tells the body what to do with energy. When insulin is low, stored energy is accessible. Fat can be released. The body can switch between fuel sources. Metabolism remains flexible. When insulin is chronically elevated, the opposite occurs. Energy is directed toward storage. Fat release is suppressed. The body becomes increasingly dependent on frequent intake to maintain stability. This shift does not happen suddenly. It develops gradually as insulin signaling becomes more persistent. Insulin rises in response to food, but it also rises in response to stress, poor sleep, inflammation, and circadian disruption. Over time, these signals overlap, keeping insulin elevated longer than intended. This persistence changes how the system behaves. As insulin remains elevated, tissues begin to respond less efficiently. This is not a malfunction. It is a protective adaptation. Cells reduce their sensitivity to insulin to prevent excessive energy influx. This process is what we call insulin resistance. Importantly, insulin resistance does not mean insulin stops working. It means the body requires more insulin to achieve the same effect. Blood sugar can remain normal during this phase because the pancreas compensates by producing more insulin. Balance is maintained on paper, but regulation becomes increasingly costly. The cost appears elsewhere. Fat storage increases. Energy access declines. Metabolic flexibility is reduced. Because insulin directly suppresses fat release, elevated insulin makes stored fat less available, even when energy demand is high. This explains why fat gain and fatigue often appear together. The body may carry ample energy reserves, yet feel depleted. Another critical role of insulin is timing. Insulin does not simply act during meals. When signaling remains elevated for long periods, it flattens the natural rhythm of energy availability. Instead of periods of storage, followed by periods of release, the system becomes biased toward constant storage. This removes the natural ebb and flow that healthy metabolism depends on. When that rhythm is lost, the body loses the ability to rely on stored energy between meals, during activity, or under stress. Hunger becomes louder. Energy feels unstable. Recovery slows. Insulin also interacts closely with cortisol. When stress signals are present, insulin reinforces storage, particularly in visceral fat tissue. This makes abdominal fat especially sensitive to chronic signaling rather than calorie intake alone. Over time, this interaction reshapes metabolism. Energy becomes less responsive. Hunger signals become less precise. Small disruptions produce larger effects. The system becomes rigid rather than adaptive. This rigidity explains why effort often feels ineffective. The problem is not insufficient input. The problem is restricted access. Understanding insulin's central role helps unify everything discussed so far. It explains why calories alone do not determine outcomes, why stress and sleep have such a strong effect, why blood tests can look normal, and why fat loss becomes progressively harder over time. Metabolic dysfunction is not a collection of separate problems. It is a coordinated shift in regulation, with insulin at its core. In the next video, I will explain how chronic insulin signaling gradually reduces metabolic flexibility, and why losing that flexibility makes long-term fat loss increasingly difficult. On this channel, I explain metabolism using medical science. This video is for educational purposes only. This is not medical advice. Always consult your physician.